To go to Chijioke in Nigeria. So if Chijioke, if you can say how is the situation of mediation and arbitration with the law, and if there is the possibility for corporate litigation to be done through mediation and arbitration.
All right. Thank you very much once again for having me, Giovanni. Thank you, gentlemen and ladies. Indeed, mediation is emerging in Nigeria. It has no choice but to actually play a very major role because the courts are overstretched. There are a lot of cases in courts that are not meant to be there in the first instance. My firm is at the forefront of pushing for the decongestion of some of these cases in courts because the system is overstretched. There are a lot of cases that are not meant to be there. You see a minor case that should be ordinarily handled via mediation, being taken in courts and staying for as long as 20, 30 years. By then, unfortunately, most of those litigants will have passed on. So you see, there's no other reason but to try and see how we can introduce mediation. Of course, there are challenges. The challenges are bound in the sense that most people the lawyers who feel that a mediator that comes to practice is, of course, going to reduce whatever costs or earnings that they're going to get. If a lawyer feels that it's like somebody coming to do what he thinks he should ordinarily do, he feels there's a loss of income. So there's a challenge, there's an opposition. But the courts have gone, in a way, are trying to overcome this challenge because you have in situations before a matter goes for full hearing, there's a pre-trial, a pre-hearing, and a pre-hearing is more like mediation. Every party is given an opportunity to say what the matters may eventually turn out to be. So at that point, you can either decide to settle out of court or to continue. So mediation has been inadvertently been introduced into the system of the judicial system in Nigeria. And like I said initially, it's emerging, but very strongly. As you may know, my brand is at the forefront of doing that in Africa. And as you may know also, I'm sure you must have noticed it, that we are the pioneers. That's why we're trying to bring from the very beginning, from the very early stage of children, trying to appreciate this very practice. Because I feel, for instance, that mediation indeed will no longer be an alternative sooner than later. It will indeed be the main thrust of alternative of dispute resolution. Because the world is filled with uncertainties. The world is filled with so many uncertainties. And of course, we know what advantages mediation brings to the table. Mediation brings a lot to the table, the advantages. So why would I want to spend so much money if I can resolve my dispute via mediation at a cheaper cost and still maintain my relationships? Like I said, now the world is filled with a lot of uncertainties. You can imagine a commercial transaction. If you've been doing business, like Italians, I'm sure you do a lot of businesses. If you've been doing a business for someone for over 30 or 40 years, and he has never defaulted, but for the sake of COVID, he defaults, will you lose that kind of business transaction for a one mistake? And you've been doing business for over 40 years, you've gained so much from that particular person. And that is what we seek to push mediation to the fore, trying to say that the basic thing about the world being faced with so many uncertainties is to try and see how you can reduce to the barest minimum any level of dispute and still make that profit. Because if you preserve your relationship in a business transaction, it means you can still do more and still to a great extent overcome whatever uncertainty to some extent humanly possible, whatever certainties that come up in the future as regards income. And that is why we are pushing for mediation to the fore. There are many people, I beg your pardon, but that's my take. Many people might want to toe the line of arbitration. Arbitration is becoming very technical, almost becoming like if you're trying to deviate from litigation, you're trying to take a detour from litigation, and you enter the boat or the car of arbitration, you're almost in the same car. What people, I'm sure, that had initiated this procedure or this practice had envisaged about arbitration is not, I don't know about your own client, but that is about my own client. It's not really working out. So mediation, more or less, is now the core. And that is why those of us share this very, very strong vision that sooner than later, mediation will no longer be an alternative. It will indeed be the main thrust for dispute resolution. Because you see now, arbitration is costly. If you're running away from cost in via litigation, you get into arbitration. If you're not very careful, it's as costly as it is in litigation. And people are faced with a lot of hardships, overall world inflation here and there, wars, conflicts here and there. So people are trying to see how to make their lives easier. You see in America, for instance, a lot of people are 40 years at the bar, 50 years at the bar, 30-something years, making a detour, trying to see, people are trying to see how they can make their lives easier. There are a lot of negative trajectories in place. So people need to know how to make sure that you don't get immersed in a lot more. You try to see how you can reduce to the various minimum, whatever you can try to reduce. Then like for instance, I'm sure most of you know about the handbook I've written on mediation. This was just to encourage people to see how they can, how you can buy into this practice and make it actually worth our while. Luckily for us, because of the skewed political system, and that is the unfortunate thing about the Black nation, and I must not hesitate to tell you the truth, that is unfortunate. We do not have good leadership in Nigeria. And that has been our major bane, because if we did, we shouldn't be waiting. The Singapore Convention should have been readily accessible immediately. But like I said, people are trying to make sure, and that is what the encouraging factor about mediation, because once the Singapore Convention, once it can, many people, the disadvantage for mediation initially was that people couldn't get it to be binding. It couldn't be binding on parties. But now, as we talk, it's becoming binding. If you have an agreement, it's binding on you to put into effect whatever agreement you had signed. So like I said, I believe it so strongly that sooner than later, mediation indeed will be the main thrust of dispute resolution. And for us in this platform, I encourage all of us to keep up on what we are doing, keep up at the fore, try to promote the practice of mediation, and of course, try to create more awareness. And how we do create awareness? I'm sure you're doing that at Equilibrium. Those of us who have joined Equilibrium as your partners, we do that individually in our own firms. And if we all pull resources together, for instance, if you have a transaction, like you've told me about the one I'm going to the Italian embassy tomorrow. If you have a transaction, and I have a transaction in Nigeria, and I represent Equilibrium very well, and you do the same for me, representing 3Cs in Italy. I mean, we've cut across the borders of race, religion, and culture. And that is what mediation does. You're sitting in your office, I'm sitting very far away in Nigeria, and we are communicating because of one variable tool called mediation. So I encourage all of us to be at the forefront at promoting it, and that's what we're doing now, and creating more awareness and encouraging its practice. It's not only about promoting it, encouraging its practice, because for us in Africa, it could be challenging, but those of us who are pioneers in a lot of fields, like for instance, the Center for Peer Mediation, I'm a pioneer of that program in Africa. I'm a pioneer of that program in Africa, very proudly so. It's challenging, but I keep trudging on. And if we keep doing this, we know eventually there will be a legacy. We will all create legacies for ourselves years after we are gone, for our names to be on the full time of the time. We have your names written, boldly imprinted in the sands of time. And that is what we all seek to do, not only about the monetary aspect, about our names, speaking volumes for us, positively, generations after. Thank you, gentlemen and ladies, for having me. Thank you.
Thank you, Chijioke, for your personal history, that you have been a pioneer in Nigeria with the mediation topics, and you are dedicating also some of your time in training young people, schools on that, and this is very important. It's your honor that it's our honor to have you with us, because you are dedicating your time also with the young people to develop mediation.